Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois. And we have got a great show for you today. Emily Zweihardt will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about how do we prepare our gardens and landscapes for when we go on vacation. Oh, there's a lot of tips and tricks here today. And you know, I'm not doing this by myself. I'm joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Ken Johnson in Jacksonville. Hey, Ken.
Hello, Chris. This is timely. It's almost vacation time.
I know. I'm looking forward at the calendar, and I can barely concentrate at work because I'm ready to hit the road and get out of Jackson here. And by Jackson, I mean Macomb.
It's almost like we planned it this way.
Exactly. Yes. Now we got a lot of tips and things to share with you. So we have to introduce our special guest for today, Emily Zweihardt, horticulture educator up in the old Rock Island, Milan, Moline, the Quad Cities, so many cities up there. I run out of words for them. Hello, Emily.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Ken. Every time, Chris, I think you're going to get it. We're in Milan is where our main office is.
Okay. Milan. Okay.
Milan,
Yes. My favorite city of the Quad Cities. So yes, thank you for being here today. So we're going to be chatting about our tips, tricks, what we do to prepare our yards and gardens for leaving town. So, Emily, we're happy to have you here on the show. Now, I think a good place to start is describing where or what we're doing in the garden, the size of the garden. So, what are we dealing with here? So what do you have in your neck of the woods? What kind of garden landscape scale-wise?
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference in terms of how you plan and prepare to leave. And so I live in the country. We have 4 acres of land that is managed at different levels. And so there's some areas that are like pasture areas that we don't actually do much landscape maintenance on. And then we have vegetable garden of a sizable manner. And so that does take some planning, both before we even start in the season and then throughout the season. We have to make sure that we're keeping in mind what we want to get out of that vegetable garden. We'll get into all of this, but like that takes some significant considerations for the times that we do leave. And then we've got primarily perennial beds that we take care of along with a lawn. And so kind of a mix of different things, different levels of management and prep and consideration. And so I'm excited to get tips from you all too, because I know how we manage it, and it's not always, it has not always been the best way, I don't think. So Ken, what do you have? What do you got going?
So we live in town. So we've got vegetable garden. We've got ornamental plantings. A lot of it is native stuff. We do have some annuals that we've planted. And we've got quite a few pots as well for all of the weird tropical plants that we grow. Although we did lose quite a few of those this winter because we had a rather significant mealybug and scale outbreaks that took out a lot of our citrus and other things. We still do have quite a few pots, which can be challenging when you're on vacation. Chris, you?
Well, our place is really on the edge of town, so we are technically in town, and then the county line is in our backyard. So we have woods behind us. We have a lot of older trees all around our home, so I have a lot of shade. So our gardens are scattered. It's wherever I can find enough sun, and that's where I'm going to put a couple peppers or a couple tomatoes. I'll be putting things in there, and we have a lot of containers and stuff also. So it's really like a word search when it comes to my garden of where did I put my plants? So yeah, it's a lot of walking. So I think maybe the next part of this is helping me out because I have so much ground to cover here. And we took a few trees down. We had an ash tree come down, which opened up a part of our yard. So that opened up a new garden space for me on the complete opposite side of my home. And so we have a lot of stuff going in the ground this year that we haven't had. So I guess, Emily, let's start off with like this first, what should we be thinking about really first off, maybe when we're planning our vacations in the very beginning?
Yeah, for me, I love travel, so I'm always thinking about where I can go. And then also the life stage that I'm in, I'm always actually gone. Our weekends are gone too. And so that has come to be a heavier influence on my gardening choices than in the years past. Um, so even in the spring, I am thinking about when we're leaving, what time of year it's going to be, right alongside of what my gardening goals are. So for example, like one year we took a spring break trip, and that is right when I was going to be starting all my seeds, or when I should have been starting my, indoor seeds. And so that pushed things back in terms of what I was able to start indoors. So I just had committed to buying some of those things, from local nurseries, kind of just saying, this is what it is this year. We don't do that every year. We don't take a spring break trip every year. And so that was just a modification that I made during that year. We do almost always go in August. And so that is the hot, dry season in the Midwest for the most part. So that it's also actually when things are coming ripe for the most part. Like a lot of our warm season crops are starting to ripen. And so that has made a difference in terms of when I plant. I'm a very excitable gardener. I think most of us are. We want to get out there as soon as we possibly can. But like one thing I've learned is that like with sweet corn, we like to grow a lot of sweet corn. And we had just the heartbreak of the summer one year when we left for 10 days in August. And that was when our sweet corn came ripe. And so we know the maturity dates for the varieties that we're planting. So we've learned a little bit of a lesson in terms of how to time it, to plant it later. So it actually ripens when we get back. And so that's one of the things I always start with, is just like, when am I going and for how long are we going? What about you guys? What is the time frame you're looking at in prepping your gardens?
So we do vacation different times of the year, so I don't do anything special. And yeah, sometimes we get back and
Okay.
we've lost, like tomatoes and stuff. We've lost a week or so, week and a half's worth. And then they've got these fruits sitting there and they're all full of disease and oozing and smelling terrible. And then you've got all these fruit on it that didn't get picked, so that slows down the flowering and stuff. So it takes a while for those plants to recover. But yeah, we should, but we don't do anything special.
Yeah, we don't necessarily do any forward planning. I think it's more of my wife says, "Hey, we're going to go on vacation this week," and then my brain wheels start turning. Like, okay, so I know this and this and this is all going to be happening outside, probably. Like it's going to be dry, and then I start making a mental list of things to prepare for, and I think we'll talk about some of those things coming up. That like things that we can do maybe to limp our plants through a little bit of neglect for often the hottest, harshest time of year for them. Yes, that's an unfortunate one.
Well, Chris, you mentioned water, and I said that we leave during the hot, dry season. So can we talk about watering? Like, how do we? That's one of the most critical elements. There's other ways to
Mhm.
prepare for it, but you mentioned water, and I said about it being hot and dry. So let's start there. How do we make sure our plants, if we're going for an extended period of time, or it's just really hot and dry, get through? So let's talk about in the ground plants first.
Mhm.
Garden plants. What are
So
we doing?
I every year, at least, so for work, what I do for work, this is not at home, is several of our master gardener projects have drip irrigation. I enjoy installing drip irrigation systems. They're all set to timers. They even have little Bluetooth connections I can control with my phone if I need to. Now, and I know for a fact that I can order a kit. It's not horribly expensive to order drip irrigation supplies anymore. They used to be, they're not terrible anymore. Often the kit comes with everything that you need. Um, do I do this at home? No, I don't. And I'm guessing probably majority of other people don't do that as well. But you can automate your irrigation for your landscape. You can even buy a specific weather system controller that monitors the weather, that gets like feedback from transpiration rates and soil moisture. And it can be a smart controller, and it can turn on when the plants need water. That is more of a common practice, especially out west, where water that's a huge deal in how much they use and how much they try to save. Not as much of an issue here in Illinois, though some summers it can be. So we can go all in on a smart irrigation system, and it can run and take care of the whole thing for us. I'd say for most of us, though, it is making sure that before we go on vacation, we are watering adequately, giving those plants a good drink of water, getting them as healthy as they can before we leave. I think that's the easiest step for most of us to take. And then, of course, there's a few other things that we can do in terms of assisting in that watering when we're gone.
Yeah, I'll always do a really deep soak. You had mentioned out west. Our soil profile also is different than out west. Like we have deeper soils in many places. You know, it varies for sure. But we've got a pretty nice, like rich loam soil where I am. And so I can count on at least mature plants having a developed root system that can access, you know, some of that available water throughout the soil, not just, you know, in the close proximity to those like seedlings. Seedlings are a different story. But yeah. Containers. Ken, you said you have containers. Well, I do have a few containers I failed to mention. What do you do? How do you prepare those?
So we've done the last several years. So one year there was a good sale, plant sale, like 75% off. And then we went on vacation the next week. So we had all these pots that we didn't get in the ground. So what we do is we got some kiddie pools, put them in there, put some water in there. Now that water gets too deep or they're standing in there for a week or so, you will start to get some anaerobic soil conditions. So it gets really smelly, really bad.
If it rains nonstop while you're gone.
Yeah.
Yep. And she'll get some roots starting to die at the bottom. But we were able to limp those plants along, talking about let them dry out after the fact. And we were able to transplant them. I think majority of them survive. So that's one way, especially if there's no rain in the forecast, putting them in a kiddie pool and put a little bit of water in there. I've seen some things where people will put rocks or something to keep those pots up above the water level, up above that water line. And that way you have that water evaporating, kind of increase the humidity. But a lot of times, at least down here, you have to really worry about the humidity levels. But that would be an option. Or you could fill that up and run a wick, like cotton wick or something into the pots and let that water move up that wick into the pots. And there's self-watering pots that can last varying lengths. It could be a couple of days, it could buy you several days of time if you have some of those self-watering pots, which is a lot of those are still that wicking system. You have that reservoir and then some kind of wick that's going to pull that water up from that reservoir into the soil.
You know, something that I do with both my containers and the in-ground stuff too is, in-ground, I mulch heavily when I leave. That helps insulate the soil, keeps water in the soil for the most part. I also will mulch my containers. I will take some handfuls of mulch and I put it over top of them. I grow in all types: plastic, fabric, porcelain, clay, all of them. And the fabric and the clay, I might even mound or pile mulch up against the container because they're very porous and they dry out very quickly. So anything you can do to insulate either the soil or those containers can also help to hold a little bit of moisture in there. But again, as Ken said, you can get anaerobic roots. This is not a long-term solution. You gotta let the roots breathe oxygen as well. So they need air. And if they have too much water, they drown. They can't breathe. So just be mindful of that. So yeah. Emily, do you have a watering strategy? Because I know you have a large garden. So what's your strategy? What's your watering strategy?
Yeah, so like I said, we do a deep water right before. I actually take a day off of, like PTO or before we go on vacation to prep my garden. And then I take one at the end of vacation to help it recover in case there's been some, some weeds or some, watering needs that need to be caught up on. So I do a deep soak into all of the vegetable garden. We mulch some of it. It's too big, honestly, to mulch the entire thing. And so we just kind of accept that. We try to have as much plant material growing so that the soil is shaded. Try to, like I said, plant things that can tolerate being more dry and more wet, during that time period that we're going to be gone. I also have someone actually come water. So we have I have a lovely neighbor who we kind of like swap services. Like I'm going to go water her plants here actually next week. And then she will be invited to do the same at our place. And then I also have someone stay at the house because we have dogs. And so we have someone keeping an eye on things. They are not gardeners per se, so I don't want to put like a full expectation of maintenance on them. But I will ask for, just a daily watering or checking of the containers. If I didn't have that scenario, I probably would, I would bunch them. I've never actually moved the containers that I have. They're quite large, and so that is not overly appealing to me because of the size of them. But if I must, we'd be able to move them on a cart or something to a shadier location. I've got a nice kind of shady area that I could put them in, do a water. I've done the mulch on the containers. I do that every year. I also like how it looks. It gives it a nice finished look. And so it's functional and aesthetically pleasing. So I think, so far we've been okay. I do always check the weather forecast too. We've mentioned rain here and there, but keep an eye on the forecast. If we have rain, I don't worry as much as if it was like last summer where it was so dry. And I thought, well, we'll just kind of see what happens, do our best. But, probably not, it's not the best strategy, but it is the reality of of leaving your landscape. So.
Sometimes you just have to resign yourself to the fact that if it's going to be really hot and dry, you're going to lose plants. And for me, in the vegetable garden, it kind of sucks, but it's not as big of a deal as losing perennial stuff. So
yeah, one strategy I will also do is to just take off all the blooms, so there's not as much stress on the plants to produce fruit. Anything that's like anything that is close to maturity or mature, of course, we would harvest and try to utilize. But anything that's like developing fruit, so say on like tomatoes, like I can just delay the harvest for a while until I have more free time. So it kind of works out just with our life schedule right now. I'll try to reduce some of that stress as much as I can. Like pick all the beans, they turn around really quick. And so kind of sacrifice that harvest that would have come either while we were on vacation or soon after to minimize the stress.
When you sounds like with your neighbor, you have established, this has been going on maybe for a few vacations. But what about that first time they came over? How did you introduce them to your garden? Do you train them? Do you leave a list? How do you pick the person to take care of your garden as when you leave?
Oh, I have a rigorous interview process. My plants are.
I knew it. And references, yes.
Yes, we check references. We have to go through a screening. No, she is an avid gardener herself, and so we've just through our interactions we've talked about just our knowledge and our passion for plants. So I felt pretty comfortable with her base level knowledge of what needed to be done or what needs to be done. But we do a walkthrough also. Things change in each of our gardens each year. Obviously like the hose situation doesn't change. We know where all the spigots are. That's the first thing we would do on our, for the first time, she showed me where all the spigots were. And so I wasn't dragging hose all over the place. Because when she and I take care of each other's plants, we don't actually group them together. That is a nice courtesy still to pay somebody is to kind of put them all together. So then they just have to water one area. They don't have to worry about missing one and, killing off a prized plant. So you could still do that even if you're having someone water your plants. She and I, we just do a walkthrough, grab some lemonade and go walk around the landscape. We look at all the everything, it's a garden walk. We enjoy each other's company, but then also kind of make that mental list. If it's somebody like when my relatives stay at our house who are not gardeners, I will just make a kind of a short list of things that I would like them to check on and leave it written down because I don't expect people to remember what I tell them, for days on end. And so just a kind of a short little list about where things are, what I would like them to look for. And then also we live in the time of cell phones. And so I always invite them to get a hold of me. Like we can FaceTime, we can, call me, text me. Very rarely am I like so off the grid that I'm unreachable. So I guess I also would say I have the benefit of having family nearby too, like a lot of family. And so they can all kind of they invite themselves over to our house to use our pool, and so like they're present. So I've kind of tasked everybody with just keeping an eye on things, and they're happy to do that too, because we all share the produce and the responsibility. So that's how I do it. I'm lucky. I acknowledge I'm super lucky to have people in my life that can do that. And so do you guys have any, do you employ like neighborhood kids or, you know, relatives or anybody to check on things while you're gone?
So we've got a neighbor that checks on stuff. We primarily have people just do pots because our vegetable garden, it's, you know, it's setting up sprinklers and moving them around. So we just tell them usually not to worry about that. And if things make it great, if not, there's always next year. But it's more for us, it's more the pots. And those are all, we had a tree cut down several years ago. So we've got 5 or 6 pots on the stump and the rest is on our deck. So they're all pretty close to one another. So it's not too terrible. Our issue is that our water spigot leaks. So there's a water shut off inside. So you have to go inside to turn the water on and then stuff. So it complicates things a little bit. You can't just go out and turn the spigot on, but so far things have survived.
Yep. Give me a call, Ken. I've replaced all the water spigots on my new house. So, and I've learned many lessons, hard lessons sometimes. Yeah. So it's a good idea. We kind of like you, Emily, we swap watering chores with our neighbor, and you know, they go out of town, we water their garden and vice versa. So I'll say another great incentive too is making sure that you let them know you're allowed to enjoy my garden. Harvest. You know, we're not here. We can't enjoy this. You harvest it. You eat this tomato. You eat these peppers. You see a zucchini ready, you better harvest it before it turns into a baseball bat. So, you know, let people know to enjoy your garden, and that makes it a little bit more incentive for them to want to come over, especially on a 90-some degree day and they're out there watering the garden. So it's a good thing for people to share the produce.
Yep, we do the same. We absolutely do the same. I also give people permission to like let things like it. I'm not going to blame you if something happens, right? Like, please, I choose people to be responsible, who are going to be responsible, who, you know, I'm trying to put trust in, but also things happen. So, you know, if one of the containers gets missed and I lose the coleus, okay, it's fine. Right. It's not going to hurt our relationship. No, like try to take some pressure off, because some people do get very anxious about caring for someone else's plants. And so I guess I just try to be like, I appreciate what you're doing for me here. We'll maintain our friendship.
There's always next.
So Ken, I was going to ask you. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
That's right. I was just going to say, if you need to train people on the one thing I've noticed, especially when dealing with public on stuff, is that you're not born knowing how to water a plant. So I think Good Growing, we have a blog article that details like, here's how you water plants. Like, you think it's very basic stuff, but there's some things that you need to know. So we'll link to that below in the show notes, how to water plants.
That's great. That's great. So I was actually going to move us towards something Ken is an expert on, which are insects, pests, and diseases. I will admit, I actually have never done any prep work. I just pray for the best. Hasn't always worked out for me. So Ken, what can I do before leaving in terms of trying to manage potential pest problems that might develop while I'm gone?
Well, ideally, you're already going out and scouting your garden at least once a week, so you know what issues there are. But you know, if you're going out of town, probably a couple days before you leave, make sure you go out and do a really thorough scouting of your plants to see if there are any issues that maybe ongoing, or maybe you're starting to see levels of certain pests increase, and that may be an indication that maybe you want to do something because you're going to be gone for a week or 2 weeks. You know, if you're going to be home, maybe you'd let it sit and wait and see what happens. But you know, if you're concerned, you get these higher levels, maybe it's time to go spray. If you do that a couple of days beforehand, and you can see if that whatever you sprayed, if that worked and knocked those populations down. If you got a lot of diseases, you know, things like tomatoes, all those foliar diseases, if you're starting to see those pop up on the lower leaves, maybe start pulling those off. If it's getting bad, apply a fungicide to those plants to maybe slow it down a little bit. So while you're gone, it's not getting out of control. But the way diseases and insects are, if we've got good conditions, if you're gone for a week, 2 weeks, you can do all the prep in the world, but if the conditions are right, you may be a little disappointed when you get back, potentially.
Well, that's encouraging a little bit because we do our very best to stay on top of pest and disease issues. But yeah, there have been vacations we've returned and been like, what? I guess we just do a fall garden now.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity to take pictures.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's the benefit of having a gardener take care of your garden too, that can recognize some of that stuff. Again, Emily, you said, hey, we could FaceTime, show me what the issue is, and maybe can help out. I guess that's one thing I'm happy to ask people to water for me, pick produce, keep an eye on things. I don't know. I'd be a little nervous asking them to like, hey, can you spray pesticide to control this? That'd probably be the one thing I'd say, you know what? I'll have to take care of that myself.
Yeah. If it was like aphids or something like that, you can just spray them off. But
With water, yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's probably leave the pesticides to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then weeds. Weeds is another one. Before we leave, we do a really thorough job, usually the weekend before, a couple days before, of getting as many weeds picked as we can. So that way, they don't have that, if we're gone for 2 weeks, we're going to have 2 weeks of growth on stuff. There's stuff that's still going to come up. But that stuff that's already up isn't getting really big and out of control. And we do mulch heavily as well to help manage those weeds. But inevitably, you're going to miss a spot or some weeds are going to pop up somewhere more than likely. But if you can get most of them out, won't have as big of a task when you get back, potentially.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we should also say that we're talking about vacations. We're not talking about snowbirds leaving for half of the year to go to live somewhere else for a couple months. Like if you have to ask someone to like start pruning your shrubs and, mowing the lawn and all that, you might want to hire someone to come in and do this for you instead of, hey, would you take care of my yard for half a year? That is a big ask. So, yeah, you might, I think the scope of time we're talking here is like 2 weeks tops. What do you guys think? Like that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's as long as we've gone away. And that was one of the years we came back and we were like, oh dear, here we go. Cleaning up. It was end of June, beginning of July. Lesson learned. But that's okay.
Yeah, I'd say 2 weeks. If you start getting longer than that, then obviously if you're having people come and watch, you're probably going to be asking more of them than just the occasional watering if you don't want things to get out of control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're
Chris,
going overseas for a month. Oh, go ahead.
No.
Nope, it was just repeating what everyone said, I guess. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna ask about lawns. You had mentioned, mowing. You're our resident expert on turf grass. We mow right before we go. That is my husband's task. He loves it. He gets it. He knows we're ready to leave when he's finished mowing. Is there anything else we should be doing though to prepare the lawn? We don't change the mow height. I have heard different takes on that, but we choose not to change the mower height. So what do you say?
You're doing everything just right. Leave your mow height the same. For our cool season lawns, we recommend mowing them at a height anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. Now on this show, you've probably heard me say 3 to 4 inches because that's where I prefer to mow. Most university literature says 2 to 3 inches, but 3 to 4 inches for my money. So within that range, whatever that height is for you, set it there and mow that. A lot of people will say, we'll bump it down to like an inch. And that way it will take longer for it to reach the time where it needs to be mowed off. That's not necessarily true because our grasses have a mature height that they're trying to reach. And so if you mow it down at 1 inch, not only could that be stressful for the grass plant, it now has to recover all of that energy that has been lost and energy that it now needs to regrow to that mature height that it wants to be at. And so it's going to grow faster and it's going to use up more energy and potentially stress out your lawn in doing so. So set it at the height you want it at and mow it, keep it at the height all summer long. And it might be a little bit taller when you get back. And it all depends on the growing season. You know, if you're going to be going on vacation, as Emily said, in like the springtime, guess what? You might have to ask someone to mow your lawn because it might turn into like a 10-inch jungle. But if you're in the middle of the summer, cool season lawn at least is going to be slowed down. It's not going to be growing as vigorously. You're probably going to be okay.
Well, that's great news. My husband will be so thrilled that he doesn't have more added to his to-do list.
Yep. Yep.
That he's doing all he needs to do. Yeah. One thing you had mentioned with along the same lines of lawn care, and I've not done this, but in preparing for the episode, I was doing a little reading, and the idea of doing like taking your equipment in for maintenance while you're gone, I thought was such a good idea. Get it repaired or get things, you know, fixed just while you're not needing them, while you're away. So when you come back, it's ready to go. Have you guys ever thought of that or done that? Probably, but
Haven't done it. I haven't thought of it. Probably should.
okay.
I recommend it all the time.
Of course you do, Chris. Yeah.
We always, the mantra, mow high, mow often, keep your blades sharp. And they always say, how often should I sharpen my blades? And the recommendation is that, you know, most people are only going to do it once a year. That's fine. Just do it once a year. But when you're on vacation, like in the middle of the summer, when the lawn's not growing as quickly, when you're not mowing as often, that is another great time mid-season to sharpen your blades, because then fall comes along, grass starts growing again really quickly. You have a sharp set of blades. If you're going to be mulching up leaves or anything like that, also, you know, just helps out. So beginning of the growing season and then middle of the growing season. Hey, if you're on vacation, then it's great. Sharpen those blades, get your equipment worked on, and get some maintenance done on it.
Very good. Very good. I think I may try that this year, actually.
It's been a few years since we've sharpened our mower blades.
I think we need to have a good growing episode where we go to Ken's house and work on his mower.
Fix everything that I'm doing wrong.
I just took the deck off of my mower and flipped it over, cleaned it all off, found a bunch of rust under there. It's only a 3-year-old mower. And so I cleaned it all off, sanded it down, repainted the bottom, sharpened my blades. Ken, I come down, do the same for you. I still got all the paint and equipment and stuff.
Sounds like you're spending a week in Jacksonville.
Don't forget the recording equipment.
That's right. Yes, we need to have this documented. Well, we talked about stuff happening outside. What about houseplants, things happening indoors? Is there any, I don't know. Ken, you have like a jungle in your house in the wintertime, at least. I know a lot of it moves outside. Do you do anything special for houseplants? Like when they're indoors, like, do you have people come in and water them, or are they on their own? Like what's your houseplant strategy?
No comment.
Okay, no comment. I see where this is going. I mean, we talked about mealybugs and scale here earlier, and you had an outbreak of those. So no comment. Emily, question redirected to you. Houseplants. What do you do when you're on vacation?
Not much, to be honest. And also I should just come clean and say I am not a huge houseplant caregiver. It's a survival of the fittest in my house for houseplants. But I do make sure that they're all watered. I don't move them. So that's some of the recommendations, is to like bunch them all together. You could put them in a tub. You could put some supplemental lighting on them if it's like a dark area and you're going to be gone for a while, so that they still have some access to light. I don't do any of that, mostly because I'm just trying to get everything else done, and some to-dos or should-dos just become, never mind, I'm not going to pay attention to that. So I do make sure that they're all watered. I don't do any like drastic like repotting or pruning or anything on them right before we go, just so that the people that are carrying it, you know, staying at our house, don't have to keep an eye on them. But it's pretty low maintenance. Once in a while I'll put them in a sink, so it's not, you know, far from your strategy, Ken, of putting them in a kiddie pool outside, sometimes I'll put them in the kitchen sink, just lower them off the windowsill and put them in there with some supplemental water. But it's pretty minimal. I don't ask people that stay at our house to water them. They're scattered throughout. I make sure they get enough water before we leave. They get a good soak. And again, pray for the best. I do. I will say, like, I accept some that sometimes like leaves will drop from them while we're gone, and I just accept that, and they usually recover just fine in the after weeks.
Yeah, so I do have a comment. So for ours, we basically treat them like our outside containers, water them well. And I've seen things, you can move them, if you've got them in a really bright window, maybe move them back a little bit so they're not drying out as quickly. If you're only gone for a week, they'll be fine with less light. You won't have really suffer any consequences for that. So move them away a little bit. Again, clustering them, I've seen stuff about clustering them in like a bathtub, filling that with water, and again, elevating those above that water line. But again, that as that water evaporates, that's going to reduce, help with that transpiration and stuff, slow that down so they're not using as much water. But I think a lot of times your pots inside can go a week and a half. It obviously depend on the plant and the size of the pot, but you can typically not watering more often than a week for potted plants. So I think they're a little more forgiving, assuming you don't, turn off your air conditioning or whatever in your house isn't baking while you're gone.
Yeah. I mean, my house plants barely survive when I'm home. So when I leave, they're probably like, thank goodness he's gone. He watered us before he left, finally, after a month of nothing. So yeah, my house plants say it's survival of the fittest, just like everyone else here. If you can't hack it for a month without water, can't live in my house. We got a lot of pothos, aloe, mother-in-law's tongue, and one philodendron that they have stood the test of time for years, and test of time and neglect.
We could also mention, though, we've talked a lot about like adding water to plants before we go. There is the potential to overwater plants too. And so like, can you kind of hinted at it a little bit with your anaerobic soil condition, in containers, like that is a possibility too. And I think generally speaking, most plants would do better with less water than more water. And so you kind of keep that in mind.
Good. Very good point. Yes. Especially if you have the non-gardener coming to look after things, they will see a wilted plant and think, ooh, that thing needs water. Now, a lot of folks we've learned, feel the soil, feel the container, wherever it's growing. And if it's sopping wet, that means we have too much water, because a plant's response to too much or too little water is often wilting. It's the same response. So check the soil before you start dousing it with water.
Yeah. And some plants do exhibit condition, like leaf conditions. There's wilting just in the heat of the day. It's a water conservation strategy. Yeah. But like tomatoes will do like a leaf curl. That's just a natural thing that tomatoes will do. And so like, yeah, the untrained or the unfamiliar gardener might say like, oh, it's drying up. Let's add more water. So, something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a lot of great information about how to prepare our gardens and landscapes for vacation so that we can leave, take a break from them, and come back and be energized and get right back to it, the grind of the gardening, so to speak. So, well, the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. A special thank you, Emily. Thank you for being here today and sharing your tips and tricks for preparing our landscapes for our vacations. So thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I can't wait to see all the slideshows of family vacation pictures, guys.
Mm-hmm. I'll get the projector fired up. We'll be ready. And Ken, thank you very much for, as always, joining me on the Good Growing Podcast, a podcast about horticulture, not a Ryan Gosling fan cast, as I just realized that. So, I mean, if you want to talk about Ryan Gosling, we sure can, but we don't need to. Cut that out.
I know who that is, but that's about the extent of my ability to talk about him.
He's on the talk tick, I think.
He's
so
Ken.
Yeah.
He's
That's
Ken.
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 He's Ken.
I
You should
haven't
know
seen-
him.
I haven't seen the movie, so. But yes, thank you, Emily and Chris. Let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. It is a question and answer session. Do you have questions about your summer gardens and landscapes? Pest, disease, whatever you got, send them in to us. Happy to answer them live on the show. And so that feel free. We have our emails listed down below in the show notes. Well, listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing.
Not great.
That sounds good.
We're
Let's do
leaving.
that. All right. We will, can't cut, you better cut that out. Go. We'll leave other things. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. All right.